Hey, it's 8:33 in the Calumet region. I'm Jim Diedlow, host of Jed in the Region, and just took a little walk around Indianapolis Boulevard while the mayor was doing his gig. And I'm going to ask the cameraman to swing out there and look at all these barricades, because this is going to affect the people in East Chicago and everywhere else. Is during the mayor's show, the Indiana Department of Transportation came out and put down barricades up and down Indianapolis Boulevard on both sides. So it looks like from about 170, let's see, that's 171st, so maybe right in front of House of Pizza, all the way to the bus station in Highland, is down to one lane in both directions, and that's going to be a problem for a lot of people. Right now, it's moving along in front of WJOB, but it's I wouldn't expect that for very long. Hey, guys, weather today going up to a high of 75. It's really gorgeous out right now, 64 degrees. Instead of going up to a high of 78, high of 75 on Sunday, and a high of 80. 78 today, 75, and then 80 by Sunday. Maybe some rain tomorrow, kind of rainy and kind of gloomy in the clouds. Let's take a look at traffic before we go to the 8:35 East Chicago show. It's been real light all morning, just about everywhere but 294. 294 from 95th to 55 is stop and go. Allow extra time to O'Hare. 80 going east and west looks pretty good. And Bishop Ford, Dan Ryan are moving along. Ryan, can you give my AP folder when you get a chance? And that ought to do it. What's your name, guy?
Mark Becker.
Tuck into that baby, will you?
How are you, sir?
You go right into the mayor's hot seat. You okay with that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
We didn't have any coffee. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, I like your new digs, but it doesn't have a coffee machine, but I improvised.
It's just paid for by the city of East Chicago. Anything to do with EC, we'll take your phone calls, 219-845-1100. We are honored to have former FBI agent. How many years?
32.
32 years FBI agent, and in his second coming, he's been the East Chicago police chief for how many years?
Coming up on 4, and I had a little stint in Portage for 4 in between then.
Yeah, so 32 and 4 and 4. So we won't say long in the tooth. We'll just say that he's a seasoned law enforcement veteran. How does that sound?
Better.
Sounds much better.
Yeah.
I do remember, I think it was the first week you came on, and I asked you a question, Chief, and it was very direct. How are you going to be able to manage the city of East Chicago with its hardball politics and machinations and reputation and so forth? And you looked me in the eye and you said, you know what? I'll take it every day as it comes, and good law enforcement is good law enforcement. And you know what? I got to believe that to be a responsible observer, you pretty much were able to cut through the crap and get things done. How's that sound?
Well, it sounds great, and boy, I'd love to sit here and take all the credit for it. But, when you remove the politics from the equation and you let good people do what they came here to do, good things happen. And I think that's what we've seen in the last 4 years. The police department has been free from influences maybe that it was under years and years ago. And so a lot of the people who were just straining at the bit to go do their job are now able to do it. And I think we're seeing that when we look at what's happening at the department. We have crime is the lowest it's been since 1985. 2013 set records, 2014 set records, and our 6-month totals that we report to the FBI in June of this year are lower than the 6 months a year ago. And I'm not going to tell you that they'll continue to go down, but, we're headed in the right direction. Eventually, at some point, they're going to pop up. It's like the stock market, it goes up and down and all around, and that's what we're going to do. But overall, if that trend can continue in its course, and the officers and the support people at the department keep working as hard as they are, we should see continued good things.
Chief, ultimately, you're a Fed. That was you for a lot of years. You come in not too long after. Dave Kapp comes in and makes a huge sweep and takes some pretty notorious people off the streets, especially of East Chicago. How important was that link to the federal system and the federal law enforcement, and
specifically we're looking for?
You know what? I had my cup of coffee, and I'm like jonesing right now. But anyways, they made coffee for me, but didn't make it for you.
I got it.
Specifically, your relationship with Dave Kapp. How much of an impact has the feds been on East Chicago?
Well, you can't really measure it. I mean, in terms of the political corruption that the feds have always been targeting. But then when you have this onslaught of, or partnership, first of all, between the East Chicago Police Department, ATF, FBI, DEA, and then the targeting and focusing on all these street gangs that like to make their way through East Chicago, the IGs, the Latin Kings, the 2-6, dozens and dozens of gang members being indicted by Mr. Kapp and his crew, some looking at, and some did receive life sentences, one after one for a death penalty that they did not achieve, but he's not coming out of prison in his lifetime anymore. That's where he'll live and die. Yeah, that gets their attention. You know, we're not looking at slaps on the wrist. We're looking at hard prosecution. Bernie Carter's done a great job for us. He's partnered with us. His staff has been outstanding. You get everyone in the same arena, on the same page, the same bus headed in the same direction, and you know, once in a while we're going to have a bump in the tracks, but I think we're doing pretty darn good.
Look to your east, Gary. 38. I think it's 40 murders now, or 38. I haven't seen. Your numbers are way down. I mean, John Bunsich was sitting in that chair yesterday, and his main message was to every other community was we have to address the issues in Gary. They will, and maybe have to some extent already, spill over into other communities. Do you agree with Bunchich's assessment of that?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think anyone who has kept an eye on what's happened in crime in the area for the last several decades knows that Gary is not an island. Lake County is not an island. In my time in Portage, back in 2008 when I arrived there, you could start to see the tagging on the back of street signs. You could start to see the gang presence making their way into the community. We have regular gang meetings now that the Lake County HIDA kind of spearheads for us in Porter County as well as Lake County. We know that these gangs move around. We know that the guns move around. We know that the guns move from here to Chicago to Milwaukee and make their trip around the Midwest. We know there's an interconnectivity, if you will, of bad people in the area. And to just look at Gary and point a finger and say it's all your fault is a little uneducated. I mean, yeah, I agree with the sheriff in that regards. We have to be proactive. You know, we started the Region Stop team a couple years ago. It's gained membership, it's lost membership, but we're back up and running again now. We do have membership full-time again from Gary and from the Lake County Sheriff's Department. We've brought our gang and narcotics unit up to staff, and they're very active with that unit. We've executed several search warrants in the last several days. We're in Gary. We're wherever people need us to be. Some of our part-time membership has asked us to come out to some festivals and the outlying suburbs. Will be out there, but this is not Gary's problem. This is all of our problem, and we all have to come together and deal with it. We can't just wait for it to come to our city because it's already here.
219-845-1100. We can take some phone calls for Chief Mark Becker. You folks watching it on East Chicago Television, we're brand new here in the WJOB studios right along Indianapolis Boulevard. You will all drive by at some point. But the one thing we can't do is you won't hear the phone call, so I will reinterpret whatever the phone call has to say at 219-845-1100. All right, guys, AM 1230, WJOB in Hammond, Indiana. I'm Jim Diedlow, host of Jed in the Region. And you just saw the importance of a backup system, as we have installed one this time. And in the past when we would go off the air because of the Comcast, you know what? Have they started construction along Indianapolis Boulevard and hit our Comcast line? But you can see the tower right from here. And typically it's a Comcast problem, and we switched over to an AT&T backup, and we are on the air right now at 219-845-1100. We have Chief Mark Becker with us. He's, of course, the chief in East Chicago. And we're taking any questions about crime that you guys might want to get. And, Ryan, you need to answer those phone calls for me there. And, Chief, let's get back to this.
Okay.
You guys have record years of low crime in 2013 and 2014. Took some real bad guys off the streets. What do you see going forward?
Well, we're not going to fix it if it's not broken, so I want the officers to continue with our police presence. Back in 2012, I think we made 3,700 traffic stops, made 10,600 the year after, 8,800 the year after. They do not have any directive or quotas to write tickets. We don't ask them to write tickets. We just ask them to stop vehicles that are not doing right things in our city. And I think people see the police interacting. They're out there. We are watching for people. So if it's hard to drive through our city without getting stopped for running through a stop sign, maybe if you're on your way to sell that dime back of crack or break into someone's house, maybe you'll go somewhere else and do it. I don't know. But the idea is to increase that presence. And then I think our community outreach program has been extremely successful. We've had Lieutenant Wilder spearheading our Citizens Academy. 3 years now, we've had almost 4 dozen people running through that thing. That's been a great program for us. A day with program, a day with the businesses, the educators, the children, which, by the way, is coming up this Saturday. Our open house at the police department from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Registrations at 9 a.m. This is our 3rd year doing it. We've got a lot of cool things for the kids, some games to play on, and we've got demonstrations by K-9 officers. We've got games, prizes, snacks. That's always a good time for the family. So that's 9 o'clock registration this Saturday, and then that runs from 10 to 2. And when they're done with that, they can trip on down to the lakefront and take advantage of the Taste of East Chicago, which is running the weekend. So there's a lot going on in East Chicago, even more this weekend than others.
219-845-1100. Let's take a couple phone calls. Let's go to Uncle Joe on line 1. Uncle Joe, you're on the air. What's going on?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, we are once again for EC, you guys on the TV in East Chicago. Chief, if you could just reiterate his question so that the folks on the camera could hear it.
Okay, well, Uncle Joe was talking about this service available at the Dunes where we can run kids out there for a different scenery and for some different events and so forth. And first of all, Uncle Joe, thanks for the call. I appreciate that information. As a matter of fact, we were just having a conversation within the last 2 weeks about what to do with our kids, keeping them active, keeping them involved, keeping them focused on things other than bad things, and that's certainly something that we can put into the mix. We're beginning some conversations about perhaps hosting a fire and police academy, maybe 7-8 weeks long. 1 week they're at the fire department, 1 week they're at the police department. We intermix some travel in between to different types of locations. That might be one we go to. We're always looking for new ideas on how to deal with issues and keep kids certainly busy and doing good things. So I do appreciate the phone call, and it's something we'll look into.
219-845-1100. Chief, by the way, you've been in plenty of stressful situations where you have had to improvise, and I got to tell you, you're doing a real good job with all the commotion going on around us. We went to our backup system, and Chief just keeps going through, and people are walking and waving, but we've been able to switch over to a backup system. Hey, Chief, let's talk a little bit about backup systems. East Chicago, for a very long time, had your own 911 system. Now you've switched over to the county system. How's that going?
I think it's going fine. Obviously, it's a work in progress. I know they're still having regular meetings as to developing protocol for how our department's going to respond to hold-up alarms, how they're going to handle this, who's going to do that, and it's not going to be completely seamless. There's going to be some bumps in the road, but other jurisdictions throughout the country have carried it out. They're happy with it. I know in Portage, when we brought the dispatchers over to Porter County, it met with a lot of resistance. It wasn't something we just jumped into, but we did a lot of research. And I remember talking to consolidations throughout the country where they said, look, you're going to get a lot of resistance. People are going to tell you it's not going to work. And after 3, 4, 5, 6 months, the bugs get ironed out and they forgot what it was they were upset about or concerned about. So I just tell people to be patient. I know it hasn't probably proceeded as quickly as maybe some of the other counties in Indiana. For some reason, we always have to be a little different. But I think we'll be fine down the road. I don't see it as a problem.
209-845-1100. We're going to go to Savio on line 1. Savio, get your question or comment out, and then Chief will reiterate it for the folks of East Chicago that aren't going to be able to hear this. Go ahead. Okay, that's a big one. We've got to remember to promo for the folks in East Chicago. So you got 3 questions there. Basically 2 questions about block parties and about Taste of East Chicago this weekend. We'll take them in order, okay? AM 1230, WJOB in Hammond, Indiana. And Chief Mark Becker is going to take block parties in East Chicago first.
Not my area of expertise, but I'll do my best. You know, we have various city ordinances and rules and regulations regarding those types of events. They're set by ordinance, there's application, there's a procedure you go through, a process you go through, and hopefully Savio followed that. If for some reason it was denied, then it would have been denied for good reason. But you know, if he still has some concerns about it, he's welcome to contact my office later today and ask for me, and I'll be glad to look into it personally for him and see what the issues were. Sometimes perhaps the person who has been denied doesn't quite understand why, and that leads to the frustration of it. So I found rather than just say no, if we tell you no and tell you the reason, it usually works out better. So
what about block parties in general? I know that East Chicago kind of has a long history of doing that and closing it off, and like he said, a closed block party, we're not going to allow everybody in. I mean, do they present any specific security problems?
Well, you know, they can. We look at the area, we look at the previous applications or previous events that have been had there. Has it created an unusual demand on our resources as a police department? What do we have to close down to make the party work? I mean, some people have offered applications where they wanted to close down major arteries in the city to enhance their block party. Obviously, we can't do that. But you know, if we can help a group have a block party and it doesn't represent any problems and everyone has a good time, I mean, that's what summer's here to do. We're certainly not against having a good time in the city. But again, if he has some particular issues, I'd be glad to help him address them this morning when I get back to the police department.
We're live here on Friday, August 28th. By the time some of you folks in East Chicago have watched this, it'll be past, but it's Taste of East Chicago this weekend. And Savio had the question, is there any extra police presence going to be out there this weekend?
Oh, there will be at the Taste, yeah, definitely. We'll have the members of the region stop team will be out there. Members of the East Chicago stop team will be out there. We'll also have a contingent of officers that we'll hire for overtime purposes to be out there. We don't expect any unusual security concerns with it. I think it's going to be a great venue. It's a new venue. We've never been over there. We usually been over by Veterans Park, over by City Hall, so we've moved over there. I understand they have a great carnival section, and it's quite an expanded event. It's a pretty big event. So I don't expect any problems there. I think you come out with your families, you'll feel perfectly safe. You'll see a lot of police presence, and there shouldn't be any issues at all.
George Park this weekend, and you can basically go to the East Chicago website, and it's all over there if you got any specific questions about it. Plenty of music, plenty of food. I've been to this thing many times at Veterans Park. I don't know how it's going to work out at George Park. I'm sure if it's bigger and more expanded, it'll be even more fun. But excellent music and excellent food all weekend long up along the lake. Let's move back to Uncle Joe's question. He's asking about children and things for them to do and so forth. I remember when you came on 4 years ago, one of the first things that you mentioned was trying to get a little bit better connection with youth in the city between you personally, but more in general, your police force and youth in the city? Been able to accomplish that?
Well, I think it's a work in progress. I'm not going to say we've done it, and there's so much work left to do. We have walked neighborhoods. We've knocked on doors. We've stopped to talk to the kids. We played basketball with the kids, football with the kids, sat and talked with the kids. We've invited them in not only for the Citizens or for the open house, but we've had other events where we've allowed them to use our gym and interact with the police department. It's a challenge, though. I look back at when I was a kid and some of the things that used to lure me or attempt to lure me to do things that weren't real smart. I mean, they're tenfold now. You have the internet. You have all these pressures. You have bullying. You have gangs. You have just all these temptations to do different things that I didn't have when I was a kid. So we have to work tenfold to try and get to these kids before other people get to them and lead them down the wrong path. I think we've been somewhat successful, and then there's those cases where we've just not been able to do it. We've been unsuccessful. That doesn't deter us from our efforts of trying to do what we can, and we'll continue to. And you hear from Uncle Joe there, and he's got a great suggestion. It's something else that came to mind. So every day we're looking for different ways to deal with it. Certainly, one of the big efforts we have underway now is our Operation Stay Smart, which is our truancy program. We're trying to get to these kids before they hit 8, 9, 10 truancies. We're trying to get to them at the 5th and 6th truancy. We're working with the city court and probation parole and our detectives to try and get these kids in line and make sure their parents know that they're not going to school, because sometimes parents don't. And then if the parents do and they still don't let them go to school, then we have to deal with the parents. But certainly that's step one, keeping these kids in school.
Speaking of, by the way, you want to talk to Chief Mark Becker, 219-845-1100 here on Friday, August 28th of 2015, our second day in our brand new studios here at Purdue's Commercialization Center. What's your presence at EC Central?
Well, it's we're taking a look at it. As a matter of fact, we're looking to develop a more permanent school resource officer program. The school does employ both private security there, and they do employ off-duty police officers there. In conversations with the mayor, we are trying to establish that school resource officer philosophy where the same face is there every day, so the kids can begin to communicate with the same police officer day in and day out, and that's what we're trying to develop. As a matter of fact, we just had some recent conversations with Paige McNulty, the assistant superintendent, and Dr. Joe in that regard. So it's under review right now. We've assigned 2 of our detectives who are very much into those types of issues, very familiar with the schools, and we're hopeful that we'll come up with a enhanced presence, put it that way, and I don't know what that means right now.
219-845-1100, that's the number here. Let's go to a guy that's been around EC for a long time. It's Streetwise. Streetwise, you're on the air. What's going on? Thanks a lot. Stop by sometime. I'll show you how it works.
You have to bring a cup of coffee, though.
You're in, bud. Talk to you. And just to reiterate for the folks on television in East Chicago, that was Streetwise. Basically praising Chief Becker here for getting out in the community, riding the buses, going to Salvation Army. How important is it to do stuff like that?
Well, it's it's critical. I think back when the FBI came to Gary, Indiana, with GRIT, the gang unit, there was a huge gap of mistrust between law enforcement and the community, and we found a way to bridge that was to walk streets, go to churches, go to picnics, do whatever we had to do to get people involved. We carried that into Portage. We walked neighborhoods, and we brought it here. And then Streetwise came to me last year, and I like his saying he's from the Show Me state, so he doesn't want to hear just words. He wants to see the action, and I appreciate that. So I didn't look at it as a challenge when he asked me to ride the buses or go to Salvation Army to eat. I looked at it as a welcome invitation. He does a lot of good work in the city, and he was asking me to join him in some of his efforts, and I enjoyed it. I mean, it was great. There was only one person on the bus who wasn't happy to see me, and I couldn't quite figure that out, but she must have had some bad run with the police. But everyone else was just smiling and laughing and talking to me, and I probably received 2 or 3 phone calls from those bus riders over the course of the weeks saying, it was nice to meet you, and by the way, I couldn't talk in front of everyone, but here's a couple tips for you. So, it panned out for us as well. So you treat people right, you treat them with respect, and you ask them for their input, and sometimes you get it.
209-845-1100, and let's go.
It is important to the people. He mentions he used to take his bike out and go for whatever during the summer and do different things. When I was a kid, my parents would see me in the morning. I'd have a bike with a baseball glove in it, a bat, a fishing pole, a football, and they'd see me 7, 8 hours later, and no one thought twice about it. But we were doing good things. We were keeping busy, and we were having fun, and that's what we got to strive for. Try and bring back some of the things that made us turn out the way we did. We've got to instill in our own city here.
219. Well, you know what? We don't have any more time. I do want to just make sure that everybody listening knows that George Beach, the lakefront up there, right behind Ameristar Casino. It's tonight, tomorrow, and Sunday, and I believe they actually started last night with wristband night. That'll be from noon to 11 p.m. Modern Midways Carnival, beer garden, food vendors, arts and craft vendors, live bands, DJ, and waxed hand vendor, whatever that is. Saturday is the big car show up behind Ameristar. You know what? You got to showcase the city. A lot of good things going, especially on that lakefront, and this is a good chance to do that.
There are.
All right, there it is, Chief Mark Becker. Thanks for coming in. This has been a paid show by the City of East Chicago. Thanks to all you folks in East Chicago watching this. And stop by the studio and take a look here. Chief, anything else you want to tell people? Oh, remind about the open house tomorrow.
Open house at the East Chicago Police Department. Registration at 9 a.m., running from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. It's free. A lot of cool things going on. A lot of things being given out to the kids. And finally, just to remind everyone, if it doesn't look right, it probably isn't right. Call the police. Let us figure it out. We've got our anonymous tip line, 219-391-8500. And as we stress time and time again, we do not need to know who you are. We're not interested in knowing who you are. We just need your information. And once we have that, give us a chance to change your neighborhood, to change the city, and keep it safe. We appreciate your support.
There it is. Let's end on that. AM 1230 WJOB.